Hi there, Sarah Hill from Story Up VR and also an ambassador with Journalism 360. And we are stoked to have so many cool creators in our AR, MR predictions for 2018 and also some very important lessons that we all learned in 2017. As we've all talked about, the VR winter was a very real thing for a lot of companies where some of them took a step back a little bit and started to reassess a little bit more about their immersive media products. And so let's start off with some introductions with the group, talking about some of those lessons learned in 2017 and some of those predictions for 2018. A reminder, we are also watching our social media sites, and you can tweet to Journalism 360 on the Twitter, which is journalism _360. And a reminder, Journalism 360 also has a phenomenal blog as well, all about VR and AR journalism. You should definitely check it out. So let's start with some introductions. And Robert Hernandez, hey, how you doing, fella? Robert is from USC. You want to say hello and introduce yourself, Robert?
Hello, everyone. I'm Robert Hernandez, professor at USC Annenberg. With my students, we've been producing immersive storytelling, VR, and recently AR under the name Journalism.
Great, and we're glad to have you here with us. Excellent, awesome to have you here with us. Harriet Hadfield of Human Image, say hello and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm in London. I'm a video journalist making 360 content, having made the move over from broadcast at the beginning of last year.
All right, Casey McGinnis, hello there.
Hi, I'm also a freelance photographer and videographer, working in 360 as well as still and flat video.
Great, glad to have you here with us. And Sarah Radel of Immersive Shooter.
Hey everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm with Immersive Shooter. We cover the industry, cameras, news, insight, how-tos, all that kind of stuff. And every once in a while, I freelance.
All right, excellent. And Thomas Seamont, how are you? How are things at Euronews?
I'm good. Everything's good. I should say good evening here because it's 7 p.m. in France.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you staying up late with us. So let's start off by chatting a little bit about some of the lessons that we learned in 2017. Obviously, there were new cameras that came out. There were new audio capture devices came out, new video codecs for each of the platforms. So it was like drinking from a fire hose, everything that you had to consume with a whole bunch of different inputs. So Harriet, let's start with you. What's one lesson or a few lessons that you learned in 2017?
Well, I think my biggest lesson was how different making 360 content is to making broadcast flat video content. Something I wrote about for Sarah Rodolphe for Immersive Shooter at the beginning of last year. It was a fascinating process for me to make my first pieces of 360 to see how different the news gathering is, the different things you have to think about, hiding from a camera, which is one of the trickiest things, I think. And then taking that through to the edit, deciding which shots to use, things like getting used to holding on those shots for much, much longer, and then experimenting with whether voiceover works or captioning, music. It was a very different way of creating content to what I had been used to in my old job as a correspondent for Sky News.
Mm-hmm. When you say holding shots, about how long are you all holding your shots when you're in your hidey hole?
I had a bit of a rule that started with a minute, and then, to be honest, it got longer and longer because I realized that it was harder to direct the action, and sometimes it was better to leave it running, if I could, for a good 5 minutes, because then you might actually get the people within the shot to hold on it and see how whether they do more interesting stuff if you give them a bit more time. So that was a really interesting experiment, but a minute minimum, but 5 minutes if possible.
Anybody else?
For us, it depends on the shot, which you were about to say. It depends on the shot, right? If we're surrounded in action happening, we covered my students' migration in the Women's March on Washington, where we worked with the New York Times and NPR, and we just placed the cameras. One, we learned to place the camera close to the action, and two, let it breathe a little bit. We didn't take as many shots to log, but just took longer shots to kind of capture those iconic.
And Casey, you were shaking your head.
In the inauguration where there was a chant, and yelling was happening, and someone snuck behind one of the people and did the bunny ears, which we did not see at all until we looked at the video in post, and we're like, my God, what a moment.
Casey?
So I missed some of that, but a lot of it sort of depended on the turnaround oftentimes. So if I'm shooting something that's semi-breaking or where they need like a pretty quick turnaround, you know, then I will tend to shoot as short a takes as possible because I know how long that transfer is going to take. So I was in, for example, we shot a thing for the New York Times in Sutherland Springs. There was, you know, it was a really fast turnaround because it was like getting there one day and they were running it the next day. And so pretty much every shot had to be between, I was trying to shoot between 48, 58 seconds or so, just to make those shots as, you know, as easy to transfer as possible. And you take longer ones too, just to have them. But, you know, it's kind of, in that case, that was a little bit of a challenge. I wanted to do longer shots, and whenever I could, I would. But one challenge this year was with that quick turnover stuff, especially if you're in kind of Wi-Fi dead zones, you don't have your own Wi-Fi, something like that. You kind of have to also make do with shorter takes so you can get them out quicker.
Yeah, anything long you shoot, you also have to archive all that data, which makes it even Sarah, you were saying?
Yeah, and I mean, to me, this sort of depends on, I was going more in the direction of when you're publishing something, how long should your shot be, when you had first asked that question. And to me, this is not something I've done before for my work, but it's something I'd like to do, is change it for how I expect people to be consuming that content. For example, RT, Edward Chisikoff, he was telling me that what they do is they cut two different options, one that is, you know, timed for headset, which requires a little bit more time to adjust the scene, and one that's, you know, timed for, you know, YouTube, magic window, desktop, that sort of thing. So that's something I'd like to test out in 2018.
Yeah, the edits and the length of the edits. Yeah, definitely something that's varied. Robert, you were saying?
Processing. Connect online. Did it work? Did it help? Maybe not.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that's always a tough question in terms of how long to hold the shot and in production and in post. And it again just depends on the story rhythm. We didn't have to hold the shots as long in prior years, perhaps because we're getting used to these immersive moments where instead of people just taking longer to take it in, they're now a little bit used to the concept to look around, but it's still.
Yep, and I think we lost your connection. Sorry, but hopefully it'll stabilize here in just a little bit. Hey, Thomas, how about you? What are some lessons learned in 2017?
One of the main lessons I'd like to remember from 2017 is how much interest there is for immersive journalism in the industry. If we look at how many applicants there were for the Journalism 360 Challenge, I think it was over 800. I also recently I'm helping with another project on advertising and immersive videos, receiving 280 applications. Of course, people are applying to get help for a project, but that's a lot of people, and I think that's really interesting to see that, you know, journalists are really getting behind, and it's just not the five of us talking about it. There's hundreds of people behind interested in that medium, and on a more professional side, we've collaborated with about 15 in Germany to cover the elections in their respective countries, and seeing here as well. You know, it didn't take a lot of convincing to get them on board. So I understand that, you know, the cost of entry to get into this medium are still high, and it's still a little bit intimidating. But that was very encouraging, I think, for the future.
Great. Hey, Casey, so how about you? Lessons learned. You have shot a lot of VR over the years for a lot of entities, and obviously there's some things that you've gleaned from that process.
Yeah, so I think this year a big lesson that I learned was to get close, and often like to get closer than even I feel is comfortable. I'm talking about when shooting. So just in the shooting process itself, um, that's my biggest difference in my shooting from 2016 to 2017 is how close I'm willing to get to the subjects, and that's really just a rule of photo and video journalism in general itself. But what that means is that means that I end up preferencing cameras that'll get me close, even if they're maybe a lower quality than another camera. You know, I really care about that proximity a lot more now as a shooter than I did when it was kind of a new medium and I was really obsessed with tech specs and that sort of thing. You know what I mean? So I mean,
You're afraid that you would, wouldn't be able to stitch it because they were too close.
Exactly, yeah. Or I was, I wanted like a better resolution, so I wanted to go with a 6-camera setup, where actually like a 2-camera setup is going to be a lot better because I can get closer, be a lot easier because of that stitch. Yeah. So that was a big lesson I learned this year as far as just shooting from a story standpoint.
Well, Robert, Sarah, lessons learned in 2018, 2017?
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess for me, the one big thing that I learned or tried to tackle in 2017 was spatial audio with the Ambio mic. And it was really daunting at first because it's got this big windshield on it and it sort of looks like a dog. And I was in a fountain in the middle of DC holding it and everybody was staring at me. And I was talking to it like, Ambio pointed upright, front facing this pillar, and being very weird about it. But I just used it on my second shoot and it was significantly easier. It almost just like clicked right into place. Granted, I haven't really done the production, but it did the back end production on the spatial audio. So I think I'm spoiled, but at least the front end production was a lot easier than I thought. And I would encourage anyone who hasn't tried it and has an Ambio available or has the budget for one to give it a shot, because the quality really made a big difference.
Sarah, one of my lessons from 2017 is not to do Ambio, only because, so I'm curious to know this, only because while it's easier and more accessible to do in production, the consumer of it, depends on their player. So the sweat versus payoff at the moment, even though the sweat is much lower and more accessible, and you can do it with the H2 and the zoom, and the tools to produce it is much easier and accessible. The outputting, to me, yet I haven't been concerned. It just hasn't worked. I can't guarantee that someone's going to benefit from that spatial audio. So I've actually, 2017, decided to pull back on that until the players catch up a little bit more. I'm curious to know, before I move on to some other stuff, what you think about that. How have you guys, how does the panel think about playing spatial audio or distributing spatial audio out there? What is your experience been?
You raise a good point, because the H2N, the zoom, does record spatially. It doesn't record the poles, so you don't get the nadir or the zenith. You get horizontally around, which for some pieces, works well. In particular, one of the pieces that we were doing, we needed the aircraft that was going above the head. So obviously the H2N, wasn't all that ideal, and that particular piece that we were shooting was going to be consumed in a headset. And we had the gear anyway, so we decided to put it together. Now, we don't do our own audio post. We have a great group of individuals who mixes that for us. And that is preferred. They like that Ambio because it gives them all different channels from all the way around. And I'm curious for others, because that H2N does really work well just to capture horizontally. What are you all using?
If I may, we used it on a shoot in Portugal, the zoom and a very light setup with the Gear 360, and it was a significant workload in post-production, but I think it was really worth it. We have the opportunity at Euronews to have people who are skilled audio mixer, and so we did a whole sound design, and it took an extra day of work, but the end product is significantly more immersive. And yeah, I think it was worth the investment in resource.
Did you say that was for worth the investment for the H2N or the Ambio? Which one did you?
Oh no, sorry, yes, the H2N. We were not looking for up and down specialization. but just, you know, being able to be like in a burnt out forest with a fireman walking around you. You hear all the steps on the burnt out branches and leaves that have fallen since. It's really cool.
In a
I
headset,
mean,
though. You're talking about consuming it in a headset?
even on well, we got two video output, one for Facebook and one for YouTube, and they were, you know, I mean, not to get into too technical, but there are different settings. One with the stereo is locked, so the music is always the same on Facebook, and YouTube is a little less advanced. But I felt that putting the audio together, once you have the audio file and the video file on the 360 Spatial audio station from the software from Facebook, is rather easy and fast.
So I would always shoot with the H2N, you know, but I just recently had on a shoot I was on in like November or October. I just had an editor say like, yeah, we never use that. I mean, I'm not editing it, you know, but it was an editor that I was working with on a shoot, and she was saying, we appreciate you recording it, but just on the back, you know, we never hardly ever use it. I still think it's great to capture as much as we can. I just think when I don't have control over the edit, you know, I'm just aware that there's a good chance that it's not getting used because of the, like you said, the sweat to payoff ratio. That's just how it is for a lot of editors right now. But I love it to use it when I can, when I have control over it.
Yeah, and I don't think, does iOS even support a spatial audio?
No.
It doesn't, yeah.
I don't believe so. It doesn't work when you view it in YouTube or I believe even in YouTube in Firefox, but Firefox just went through a big overhaul. When I watched YouTube desktop in Chrome, it worked, but in other browsers, YouTube Spatial did not work. So of course, it'll reach parity and Spatial will be standardized, and it will make all the difference. It will make these videos a lot more immersive. But currently, there's so many bells and whistles and resources and time commitments for the projects that we do, I've decided to put that on a semi-hold a little bit. Another thing, before we move on from other lessons learned, a little detail that I've decided to do, which took me a moment to kind of embrace, is not place my logos in 3 areas. Definitely for lower thirds for subtitling. But one of the things I noticed is own a front at the very beginning and have it all black pointing to the front to start establishing where that front is. I'm curious to know if you guys have done that as well, but I've been doing that. I've been taking that leap of here's the front. Chances are you're not on a swivel chair or standing up. Mm-hmm. You're sitting down forward and you're looking in this 180 degree and you will consistently go to the front. I'm gambling, but that's one of the ideas I've been percolating since last year.
Anybody else? Harriet, you were saying.
Yeah, it was actually just on the spatial audio. I took my new Zcam on a test shoot in Switzerland, and I took the Zoom mic with me, and I had the best of intentions of using it. But I found really kind of operating on my own, it was in the sort of gathering phase. It was one too many things to have to think about. Now, of course, I'll hopefully get better at it, but I do think it depends what kind of a production you're doing. Human image, my vision for it will be, powered by video journalists. So I want it to be as run and gun as possible. So for me at the moment, particularly knowing that a lot of people aren't using it yet in post, I don't think it's worth it for me at the moment.
So if you just joined us, you are watching a live chat about lessons learned in 2017. We're going to be talking about predictions in 2018. So far, the 2 lessons learned, not everyone is using spatial audio as far as the full rigs of the Ambio Sennheiser mics. They're using the easier to capture H2N mics that records horizontally. And not everyone is baking in their CGs on a cube face anymore. They are orienting the viewer, as Robert just said, on what is front. Louis Jab just joined us from Immersively. Hi, Louis. Real quickly, what's one lesson that you've learned in 2017 that you could share with the group?
I think one lesson I've learned in 2017 is that immersive journalism, and in particular 360 video, has a great deal to play in what has become known as the trust economy for news. I mean, now that, especially with the latest change to the Facebook algorithm, I mean, that what you call the attention economy for news is pretty much a busted flush, I mean, in the long term. And that I'm increasingly interested to see what people will do because of the transparency that 360 brings. Whether you're in the shoes of the reporter, or whether you're in the space with the reporter, or whether you're using the power of 360 to tell a community story. It's a great way to engage directly with the audience in a way that everybody says now, and they're quite right, has been lost. So that's my big takeaway from 2017.
How about stereo versus mono? Are you all primarily using stereo rigs or mono rigs? And do you have a preference when it comes to turning those stories quickly?
We definitely use mono. Our go-to camera has been the Zcam S1. But as editor-at-large of Immersive Shooter, I get to handle other cameras, and I finally got to play with the Insta360 Pro, and that offered stereo, and it was really fantastic and really easy to use. But interviewing people who've used the Pro talk about still using it for mono. I think mono for me is the way to go for quick turnaround pieces. You have to have a good rendering system. I found myself getting nauseous, maybe user error, but I found myself getting nauseous and I had some pretty buff machines when I was consuming some stereo stuff. Again, it could be user error, but for run and gun, quick stuff that I try to do for journalism, mono seems to work.
Casey?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, Louis, I wanted to know if you could give some examples on your note about things in 2017 that have given some transparency or that have helped viewers understand like where the journalist is coming from, or could you just give examples of what you're talking about?
There's one that Trey Bundy piece called Disfellowshipped, and that was a piece about Jehovah's Witnesses, a woman who had grown up with Jehovah's Witnesses and had suffered a great deal of abuse. And Trey Bundy is extremely eloquent. It was his first piece in 360. And he said what really intrigued him was that he felt for the first time he was able to put the viewer in his footsteps. Mm-hmm. So I refer to that piece in particular because it's an example, as a form of transparency where you're showing somebody your process, rather like David Fahrenholt's famous showing his notes on how they were checking on the Trump Foundation for the Washington Post. Different format, but the same principle. It's almost like you're showing your process. And then on the trust thing, generally, that a lot of the pitches and proposals that saw in 2017, whether it was in competition entries or things just discussing with people, where when people wanting to tell community stories, and that's something which AJ Plus are big into these days, that is a form of transparency where you're showing the process to a community about how they might tell their story. So that is, a different kind of transparency, as it were, because by them taking part in the storytelling, learning about a new format, it's like they're discovering their own story in a new way. And I think that's a very important way that immersive storytelling can really score, whether it's because of its strength in closed field or because of its strength to acquire information rather like CCTV. I think that artistically and journalistically is a very important function of 360 video.
Great point, Ms. Jeb of Immersively. Harry, I want to bring you in. We're going to move to predictions for 2018. What do you see out there as far as gear, shooting? What do you see coming around the bend as we have just a few more minutes left?
Yeah, so my answer to this, Sarah Adol already kind of touched on it, and it's really looking at versioning the content for how you think people are going to be viewing it, something I asked Louis about last year as well. And his answer was very much, if you think someone's going to watch it on Facebook, not in a headset, then make it a shorter, more engaging piece. Whereas in a headset, the shot duration is going to be longer. You don't want to have as much movement. So I've been experimenting because I like making action films with lots of sports and adventure, and I wanted to incorporate POV. And it's an article I'm actually currently trying to write for Immersive Shooter about whether or not POV works. And one of the trends I think we're going to see is that people versioning their content and making social, engaging content that has much more movement in it, that isn't really designed for a headset. I think you should be able to watch it in a headset, but it's not headset first. So I think that's going to be a trend for next year.
Thomas?
Yeah, I think we're going to see maybe a breakthrough around the Olympic Games in terms of live VR. At least I hope so, because I think that'd be interesting and a good occasion globally to reach a, wide audience. I'd like to see some advanced research, more advanced research. Some have been done by the Google News Lab, for instance, but I'd like to see more. On a more negative note, I think the manufacturers and the big companies that have a lot of stakes in 360 are going to progressively stop funding 360 content the way they have been via partnerships or.
The end of the good old days, right? Yeah. Sarah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess this isn't necessarily a prediction, but it's sort of a curiosity that I'm looking forward to sort of having answered in 2018 is how people respond to the entire concept of like VR 180 or non-360 related content. At CES, there were a lot of VR 180, a lot of news that came out about that. Panasonic is developing a VR 180 add-on for their GH5 that they just announced at CES. So I'm sort of curious to see how that develops because a lot of my industry friends, more at the high-end level of production, I've seen in the past, 6 months, even though the industry seems to hate on VR 180, have been doing a lot of, 270, 250 degree content so that they can still be there in the shot without having to worry about doing a clean plate and removing themselves and all of that. And they can actually take back some of that directorial opportunity. So I'm curious to see how audiences respond to that and how that develops. And then I'm also really curious to see how some of this, like, I want to call it like six degrees of freedom because it's not like full 6 degrees of freedom, but some of the things that Insta360 and Kandao are promising to do with their cameras and their depth maps being generated from their cameras. And Adobe Project Sidewinder is going to be able to do this with any sort of depth map, so you won't even need to use Unity to do it. But instead of being able to do like this, we don't turn our heads as humans like a camera on a tripod perfectly like this. So if we're in a headset and we jostle a little bit, this subtle six-off, I've been calling it, would let us, would make that motion feel a little bit more natural. So I predict that that's going to be a bigger thing, and I'm curious to see how VR 180, 270, whatever you want to call non-360 turns out.
Yeah, the Sidewinder project is fascinating. Chris Bobotis gave a great talk at CES as part of VR Fest about some of the fascinating things that they're doing with volumetrics as well. Robert,
I have two. One, augmented reality powered through photogrammetry and videogrammetry will start to pick up a little bit more, which will definitely impact how we tell and distribute immersive stories. We did some experiments last semester, and it's hard to share them because the distribution model isn't there yet, but we have some ideas. And the second one, which I think will be very big, actually comes from Christina Heller, CEO of VR Playhouse. She made a comment last year in terms of social experiences in immersive spaces. And she said everything is social. Her brain exploded and how that is. And I will say, in the last couple of weeks, I've been going and sharing immersive experience via Facebook Spaces, and even Pixar's Coco in social and headsets. I don't know if you've tried that or not, but it's really engaging and powerful and beautiful. And I've been trying to think about how do I tell a story in a certain way. And actually Facebook Spaces, I think, has a lot of interesting immediate potential that I'm trying to prototype. Holding presence with someone, even if that someone is a journalist as your tour guide, there's something there to be with someone that I think has really interesting potential. So breaking down the isolation of these headsets and bringing people together, I think has a lot of potential.
Good point. Lewis, predictions for 2018?
I think that we're going to see a lot of progress maybe towards the end of the year on distribution. principally through through aligning the latest headsets to set-top boxes and televisions. So in other words, that I think that one of the big breakthrough areas for, say, 360 video in particular is people's evening entertainment slot. In other words, that when you have your home entertainment, whether you have a set-top box or whether it's built into your latest TV, and you have the option to watch 360 scrolling on your TV or by putting on one of the new cable-free but high-resolution headsets, whatever you might have. And that set-top box manufacturers and TV manufacturers are increasingly going to, and maybe they are and should be, packaging one of these, the next generation headsets with their TV set-top boxes. And that is our big opportunity for distribution, say, over the next 2 to 3 years. That, I think, is very important.
Casey, how about you? Predictions for 2018?
Yeah, so people are already writing the obituaries to like the pivot to video. And I think at least at the entry level, the kind of content that I produce a lot of, the 360 that's viewed a lot on desktop, click and drag, or on mobile without a headset, that's going to be affected by what's happening just in web video as a whole, where it's kind of been a little bit of an artificial ad boost, and I think advertisers are aware of that more than they were. So as we're going to see changes in just regular flat video, that's going to affect 360 publishing at the entry level, which is that, again, that desktop, it's auto playing on your Facebook. That's where a lot of people enter into 360 VR, and I think that's going to be affected this next year. So I think there might be less, but it'll be better quality. I think people will be making, putting more like mid to long term projects and fewer small to mid term size projects in that space at least.
And I think as far as a prediction for 2018, we're going to see a lot of biometric inputs. A lot of the headset manufacturers at CES even were baking EEG sensors into the face masks for headsets. So we know that Facebook is building a brain mouse, heart rate variability, respiration. All of these things are things that you can use as an input to truly make a story living, as Google News Lab and others have called it NFPC. So I think EEG and brain and everything that's happening with AI and neural networks and being able to use that data in those large databases in order to trigger things in the environment is fascinating. And Robert has a prediction. What do you think about Ready Player One?
I was full disclosure. We were chatting like who should talk about Ready Player One. I'm a fan of the book. It's derivative of Snow Crash, but it's a love letter to my childhood, and I'm worried that it's going to bomb at the box office. It might be fun, but I don't think it's going to advance the possibility of storytelling, immersive storytelling. Thoughts on that movie coming out?
Just, having read the book, as a creator, you worry about what kind of impression that'll leave individuals about the difference between the real world and the metaverse. So that concern of mine is out there, just having read the book. Will the movie be the same? And how will people take it? I don't know. Thomas, you have a prediction on what you think it'll do outside the...
Yeah, I've read the book as well, and even as an I know a lot about the US culture, but I still feel that it's very referential on stuff going on in the US in the 80s especially, and how that's going to play out with the foreign outside of the US, and also, we are journalists or documentary makers, but this movie is going to put a lot of pressure on entertainment VR content creators, and I wouldn't like to be in their shoes when a 13-year-old is going to see this movie with all the Spielberg special effects, and then going home, maybe buy a PSVR headset and be like pretty disappointed in the end.
Well, final words from the group here before we close it out. What's a message that you want to give to either new creators or veterans to help make their jobs easier in 2018?
Well, I feel like I've got a really easy answer to this one, even if it is a bit, promotional. But immersiveshooter.com, we exist to serve you guys, to answer your questions, to build resources for you. So, check out the website if you're new, or even if you're old and want to learn something. And if you have a question, we have so many people, all these people and people at Radiant Images who answer our questions, technical, non-technical, whatever, that we could help you get answered. So just consider us as a resource.
Yeah, I can jump in on that and say that it's exactly a year since I started looking at making 360 content. So my learning curve last year was so steep. And really, I couldn't have done it without at least half of this panel that I'm looking at, who have all taken the time to help me with various technical or storytelling aspects. And now for the little knowledge that I have, I'm trying to share that. So I've already had quite a few filmmakers come sit with me here. I've shown them all the workflow that I can, all the cameras I can. So anyone who's in the UK and watching this, please do send me an email, because I'm really, really happy to share all my learning and to get you started making 360 content.
Harriet, how do they contact you?
They can send me an email, harriet.hadfield@humanimage.com, or just get hold of me on Twitter. It's @HarrietHadfield.
And that's with one T.
It is.
Casey, how about you? Final words? Wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about that. One thing that's really helped me is also the Inside VR and AR newsletter. I just love newsletters, and that's just one that I'm subscribed to. I just subscribed to that like within the last, it was just like a month ago. But there's just so much there, and it can be a little bit overwhelming at times. So my rule has just been to click on one thing and really kind of invest in just learning about that one thing, and don't like let myself get overwhelmed with everything new that's going to be coming out of the next year. So kind of taking it one thing at a time when it comes to new tech or new techniques or things like that.
Yeah, a lot of great resources out there with those newsletters. Journalism 360 also has a blog. So if you go to medium.com/journalism360, you'll see a lot of great work from some of the people who are in this hangout, where they are not only doing, but blogging while they're doing it, about their mistakes and lessons learned. Lewis, how about you?
I would say focus on one-to-one connection between your content and your audience. That's the long-term future of journalism, and I think one of the long-term solutions for making journalism self-sufficient. And it's an area where 360 video scores extremely strongly and can do so in very simple, low-cost formats. So that would be my advice.
Robert?
There's been a lot of talk about a bubble is going to burst, are people pulling back or leaning in. And my words for going into 2018 is, once you've experienced these immersive experiences, there's no going back. So I would encourage you to continue to iterate and explore, regardless of what your budget level is or your experience level is. You can get in very affordably, going to immersiveshooter.com to learn on the resources there and teach yourself this stuff. But this is going to happen. Is it going to happen in 2018 or 2019 or who knows when? I don't know, but it's going to happen. It's really powerful storytelling, and we need to get ahead of it.
Great. Thomas, parting words for new creators or veterans?
Yeah, don't be discouraged. Like Robert said, you have to learn. You have to just keep reading. New stuff might interest you. New tools are going to come up, make it even easier. I've shot my very first 360 video 2 years ago to this day, and it's gotten considerably more efficient to shoot, to publish, etc. in a very short amount of time, if you think about it. And yeah, and just welcome if you start shooting tomorrow, and come say hi. And my journalism community is a family, and all those people here have helped me tremendously. And feel free to come and ask us questions.
Excellent. And did I get everyone? I think I did. Sarah, did I get you already? Yes, I did. All right. Guys, thank you for sharing your time today. I'm going to adopt Casey McGinnis's mantra, which is get close, right? Now that we know where the stitch lines are, or that it's auto-stitched, we can definitely get closer to our subjects. So that's pretty neat. If you'd like more information about Journalism 360, again, follow Journalism 360 on Twitter. That's at journalism_360, or you can also check out our media blog at medium.com/journalism360. keep an eye out for more information about those grant recipients and to follow along their work and to learn follow on that blog for new opportunities that might be coming up that you can use Journalism 360 as a resource, perhaps to support your work in the future. We'll see you later. Have a great day.
Bye.